So you're training, you're eating well, or at least what you think is eating well. You're not smashing the takeaways or necking loads of alcohol, but nothing's really changing. The scales aren't moving, your clothes aren't fitting any better, you don't feel like you're looking any better in the mirror, and you're slowly starting to wonder, what's wrong with me for none of this hard work to be paying off? And I can tell you now, you're not broken and you won't be doing everything wrong. But what you will be doing is misunderstanding one thing. And it's the thing that determines every single fat loss result. And that's energy balance. And not considering this is something that can totally undermine all of the efforts that you're putting in at the gym. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what energy balance is, why it's a bit more nuanced than eat less, move more, how it can affect your approach to food and your goals more broadly. Understanding this principle is definitely the thing that takes people from being stuck to actually getting a result. I lost and kept off 15 kilos by understanding this. And it wasn't because I was training that much harder or that I had implemented this like magic diet, but I had stopped guessing and I was gathering data and I was making decisions based on the outcomes. So if you feel like you've been doing absolutely everything bang on the money and still not seeing results, this is probably going to be that missing piece that you need to get to grips with. And if you want a practical framework, a starting point for building balanced plates that will leave you feeling full and align with your goals, including fat loss, then I've whipped up a plate framework which you can find in the description below. So energy balance is the relationship between energy taken in, primarily through food, and energy expended. So that's largely through like movement, activity, metabolism, that sort of thing. It's not a cult, despite being spoken about as such online. And it's not a philosophy, it's a law of physics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, it's only transferred. So if your intake is less than your output, that means you're inevitably going to end up weighing less. And the reverse is true. And if your intake matches your output, then that's what's going to keep you ticking along at the same sort of level. And this is a fundamental principle. My own coach used to say calories are king. I tend to put energy balance is boss in some of my content. It's something that you're absolutely not going to escape. And it doesn't matter what you're doing with respect to training or nutrition, this is the thing that underpins absolutely everything. Everything else that gets talked about online and what you might read and hear, your macros, your meal timing, your supplements, any sort of training stuff that you're doing, all of this stuff sits on top of it. It hangs on this principle. So often when we're talking about calories in, calories out, people tend to throw the phrase around of just eat less and move more. I've been guilty of it myself, but the reality is that that is a somewhat of an oversimplification. Because yeah, food consumed is obviously a huge component of that energy in, but there's a lot more that comes into it. You know, how food is prepared, what it is that you're actually eating, your hunger hormones, your digestion. And this similarly applies to energy out, because energy out isn't just movement, there's actually 4 components to it. So you've got your energy expenditure through exercise, but then you've also got your resting energy expenditure, which actually makes up to like 70% of that number. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is basically everything that you do that isn't exercise. So fidgeting, general movement, steps, that sort of thing. All of which can be hugely variable from person to person. And then the last thing is the thermic effect of food. So how much energy it actually takes to break down the individual components of your food. So your protein, carbohydrates, your fats. So on the thermic effect of food alone, people might not actually realise that there can be quite a significant difference between the different macronutrients. And it actually takes a lot more energy to burn protein than it does the other types of nutrient. So yeah, as you can see, when it comes to this energy in, energy out equation, most people a lot of the time are only thinking about exercise, but a lot of the big shift will come from the other 3 components. So you might be sat there thinking then, why is it that everybody feels like they're doing everything right, but they're still not losing weight? And 9 times out of 10, it's because they're overestimating how much they're actually doing and they're underestimating how much they're actually consuming. And it might not be on purpose, but it's usually simultaneous. And it's the little things. It's the handful of nuts as you're walking past the cupboard, a little drizzle of oil, the extra latte you have when you go out with your mates, the sneaky bevy that you have at the weekend, tasting your kids' food, and then other stuff, probably genuine unawareness at the fact that you might have hit the gym that day, but as a result your body compensates and your NEAT will drop, so you're fidgeting less and you're just moving organically a little bit less as your body is holding on to some of that energy. And all of that little stuff will compound over the days and the weeks and the months to result in the fact that the deficit that you thought was there probably just wasn't existing in the first place. Rightio. So this is the bit that I might have alluded to at the very start of this video, and I would say if you're going to take one thing away, make it be this. NEAT. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis. I've said it already. And the NEAT problem is the sneaky bugger. So NEAT is everything that you do that isn't deliberate training. So think along the lines of fidgeting, moving between rooms, your steps, even just standing up. It's virtually entirely unconscious, and it is the thing that varies most between person to person. And it might feel a little bit counterintuitive at the start, but if you're increasing your activity levels, your body almost fights against that a little bit and starts trying to reduce your NEAT. So if you've had like a really hard training session, for example, and you get in, you might find, or you might notice that you're starting to fidget a little bit less. You're just a little bit less inclined to bounce between room to room. Essentially, your body is trying to compensate. You probably just want to be sat on the sofa a little bit more. And that can obviously have a consequence. It has an impact on your total daily energy expenditure. And this can tee you up for thinking that you've earned a bigger deficit than you're in. And if you're making decisions based on that baseline, then it's no wonder that this is where your lack of progress and plateaus can start sneaking in, because you feel like you're doing everything right, you're training consistently. So the argument against tracking calories is that it's not entirely accurate and you can't measure them down to the absolute minutiae unless you're working within a lab setting. But it's not really about that. What it is about is it's a quantitative measure for you to be working with, right? It's data that you can collect and adjust. It isn't really about being perfect. It's about building that awareness of the energy that is actually coming in and how that is partnering up and comparing to the energy that's going out. And when people are actually starkly faced with those figures of what their intake actually looks like versus what they thought it was, it's 9 times out of 10 met with quite a lot of surprise. And actually it's in that gap between the incorrect perception and what the reality actually is that people who are struggling to see results, that's where those results are dying. So if you got this far into the video, you might now be wondering what the practical realities of being in a deficit actually are. So generally speaking, 500 calories is quite a nice rounded and accepted figure. That would tee you up for about half a kilo of weight loss per week. A sort of established, accepted rate of body weight loss over time is 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per week, right? And this is realistic, and it's not to say that you can't do it faster. Some people might, but what you've got to remember and account for as you're doing this sort of stuff is that the goal isn't just weight loss, it is fat loss. And if you try and go too hammer and tongs too fast and everything isn't quite in place, you'll be losing muscle as well, which is something that we're really trying to preserve during a fat loss phase. And actually that distinction between fat loss and weight loss is something that is pretty critical, I'd say, and is missed by a lot of people because it just doesn't really get mentioned that much. The other thing that being in a deficit seems to stir up is this talk of scales and scale weight. And yeah, I'm going to be another one of those content creators that's going to tell you exactly why scales aren't the be all and end all, but they are part of a bigger picture. Just like your numbers of your calories, scale weight is data. so there's value in collecting it. But what you've got to realise is that what you want to do is look at trends over time, because scale weights fluctuate for so many reasons, down to the food that you've been eating, like how much of it, is it still sat in your gut? How salty was it? Was it really carb heavy? And that's not bringing in the complexity of stuff like your hormones either. But why that's important is that week on week, 1 week of being in a deficit might not show the direction that you're after. It might show a flat reading. It might even go up. But that doesn't mean you've cocked everything up or things are going wrong. That is just human physiology. It's just the way that your body works. And it's also the reason that you need to start thinking about some of the other elements when it comes to your body and your training. How is your training feeling? What are your energy levels like? Are you sleeping well? Are your clothes fitting how you want them to fit? How do you feel when you look in the mirror? So as I say, yeah, scales are one point. There are plenty of other KPIs for you to be collecting in order for you to start drawing out any conclusions. But as we're approaching the end of this video, I just wanted to come back to why this energy balance equation is the foundation. So my own coaching is built on a sort of pyramid, particularly when it comes to the nutrition side, where food quantity is on the bottom, food quality then goes on top, right? And food quality can break down into how much protein you're consuming, your fiber, the balance of carbs versus fats, these little details. What that should demonstrate to you is that food quality, protein amounts, meal timing, the diet that you're following, all of these little things are minutiae. They're hanging on this fundamental flaw that if that isn't in place, none of them are going to matter. Food quantity and that energy balance is the cake. All of these other things are the cherries and the sprinkles on top. Because you can eat the cleanest diet in the world, but if you're eating too much of this stuff, then you're not going to get the result that you want. And that's your perfect, right? On the flip side, you can eat imperfectly and still see results. But the benefit here of understanding the importance of that consistent deficit is you can start removing that morality from food and just improving your understanding and awareness of what it takes to actually get the result that you're after. So just to round off, what do I suggest that you do with this? I maintain that you don't need to track forever, but there is huge value in spending a bit of time tracking and getting an understanding of this stuff early on in your journey. Because if you actually engage in the process, even if just for a few weeks, it teaches you what you need to know. It teaches you what balanced plates look like, what reasonable portions are. You'll start to see how you feel depending on the foods that you're eating, and you'll learn what being in a deficit actually feels like. Ultimately, the tracking is a bit of education, and it's the education that teaches you the lessons that underpins everything that comes after, and it will make all of that stuff feel simpler, more straightforward, more logical. I say it quite a lot on Instagram and in some of my other content. Tracking doesn't have to be a life sentence, but it is the foundation. If you want to see real life implementation of this sort of stuff, what it actually looks like day to day, the sorts of meals and processes that I go through, then you can find all of that over on my Instagram at Charlie's Food and Fitness. Hit subscribe if you found this one useful. I'll be churning these ones out week to week. And just a quick reminder that if you wanted that plate framework for help building plates that will support the sorts of deficit and things that we've discussed in this video, you can find that in the description below.